Although it might seem as though OKRs and KPIs are two different methods that organizations must choose between, OKRs versus KPIs is a bit of a misnomer, as they are actually quite complementary. Most organizations will benefit from using them together and employing one or the other, depending on what they need to measure or to monitor. The objectives and key results, or OKR, is a goal management system or framework made popular by tech companies like Google and Intel for defining, aligning around, executing, and measuring progress toward key organizational goals, utilized by teams, both large and small, to collaborate and achieve stretch goals through a framework that requires regular check-ins, feedback, collaboration, and problem solving. OKRs link organizational and team goals in a hierarchical way to measurable outcomes. In simple terms, OKRs answer the questions, where do we want to go, and how will we measure our efforts to get there? Objectives in the OKR framework are big picture, aggressive goals in answering that question of where we want to go. A vision is established for the organization, the team, or an individual to orient themselves around. By definition, objectives should be ambitious, qualitative, actionable, and time-bound. The purpose of objectives in the OKR structure is to challenge an organization to reach towards big, intimidating goals. Key results are how organizations measure their progress against those objectives. They should be measurable, specific, actionable, and verifiable. Answering that question of, well, how do we get our efforts to get there? The verifiability aspect is crucial. Key results lay out specific, actionable requirements that the team or the individual responsible for them either completes or doesn't, giving team members a clear-cut way of knowing whether or not they're making progress, and leadership, a subjective way of assessing performance. Each objective will typically have a handful of key results attached to it. More than one, but usually fewer than 5. Because each of these key results is measurable and verifiable, organizations use the key results as a sort of rubric to score the extent to which they achieve their objectives. Once they're all completed, the objective is achieved. Whereas KPIs are measurements that exist within a framework. Most people are familiar with the basic concept of KPIs, or key performance indicators. KPIs are performance metrics that measure the success of an activity, initiative, product, program, team, or organization. In most organizations, the acronym KPI is used synonymously with business matrices. KPIs are usually quantitative or measurable, which means that they're specific, time-bound, and actionable. They can be leading or lagging indicators and can be measured weekly, monthly, quarterly, or even annually. They can be set and measured by individuals, teams, departments, or the organization as a whole. There are literally hundreds of different matrices that are KPIs. The term can be used to describe virtually any matrix that is, number 1, able to be measured or quantifiable. 2, compared to a target for context. In other words, not just pulled out of the air. They should be based on some sort of specific contextualized data. 3, they should be specific enough to be actionable. Anyone reading a KPI should be able to identify what the target is and start to generate actionable steps to achieve it. When establishing KPIs, it's important to define answers to each of the following basic questions. Who, what, when, where, why. Let me be a little bit more specific. Who is responsible for this KPI? What is the objective of this KPI? Why is a KPI important to measure? How do we have a plan on achieving this KPI? And when do we plan on achieving this KPI? However, when it comes to managing, having great KPIs identified by themselves is not enough. This is where the relationship between OKRs and KPIs are consummated. Every business has a plan and a budget for every year. These plans and corresponding budgets are typically based on projections of their KPIs based on what you did in the past and what you target to do or expect to achieve that defines the future, and this is where OKRs come into play. Let me give you an analogy. Let's say you're going on a road trip. The goal is to reach your destination. Your OKR is the trip plan. Your KPI is your speed, your fuel level, your engine temperature. Let's imagine you're driving to some place and the final objective is your destination. Your OKR is a trip plan and your KPI is a dashboard. OKR is a trip plan and the KPI are the matrices that you see on your dashboard, your speed, your fuel level, telling you how fast you're going, how much fuel you need, and what you need to check in at your next pit stop. But there are other things that you care about, which aren't necessarily on any dashboard. OKRs and KPIs help you to achieve the same objective, but they perform different functions. In essence, OKRs and KPIs can be used together, which is where it can start to get a bit confusing. For example, a metric can start as a key result and become a KPI once a program is launched. Here's an example of how that might happen. Let's say an organization has an objective of becoming the #1 supplier of a certain product by the end of the year. The key results for this objective might include updating the product listing with specific keywords and phrases, generating a certain number of 5-star reviews for that project, maybe achieving a certain number of sales. After successfully completing each of these key results, the organization is able to achieve its objective of becoming the #1 regional supplier of that product. Now the mission changes. Instead of working to achieve the status, the team switches its focus to maintaining the status. It then establishes the following KPIs. Let's say, generate X number of 5-star reviews for that particular product each week. Or maybe increase the quantity of product being sold by 15% over the next quarter. Now that big, ambitious OKR has been achieved and the team knows what it takes to achieve it. Maintaining the status quo becomes their target. So their key results now become KPIs. Whether you choose to use OKRs or KPIs or a combination of the two to track and measure your performance, the important thing is this. You must measure to improve. This means not only sitting down to establish your goals and communicate them with all key stakeholders, but also taking the time to assess how you did it at the end of each planning or execution cycle. The last part is a part that is so often overlooked, but is arguably where most of the value lies. OKRs and KPIs can each have their place in an organization's measurement system. The question is not which is better, but which is best for the needs to be measured.